Good morning, everyone, and welcome to class number 2 of OLC4O. We are in term 1B, and these are our morning announcements. So this is week 1 of classes in term 1B. We will have 9 weeks in total, and there are 2 weeks where we're on Christmas holidays. And as we get closer to that date, I will remind you, but there will be 2 weeks where there will be no classes. But otherwise, OLC4O broadcasts live every Monday to Thursday from 10 a.m. to 10:55 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is how you can watch and listen live. You can phone into the studio and hear the broadcast that way. You can tune in to the radio if you're local, if you have 91.9 FM. If you have Bell ExpressVu, you can listen to channel 972. And I have a Zoom link, and that's it right there. So you put this whole address into your browser, and that link has been emailed to you. You can ask for that link through your DEC. I will post it to the YouTube videos. It's in the study guide, and I will post it on my Facebook. So if you need that link, it's there. But if you don't know how to watch live, if you're unsure of anything, just reach out and ask somebody. So as soon as the course is done, I try to get it up the same day, but at the latest it'll be the day after. I will have all of the classes posted to my YouTube channel, so you can watch them there. And if that works for your schedule, if you can't attend in the morning, you can always watch the day after, or whenever it's convenient for you. You do need to start submitting work. I've heard back from a few students, and some of them have said, yeah, it's hard to get started, and I agree with that. It is hard to get started, and I think the longer you put it off, the harder it's going to get. So you don't have to finish a whole unit, or even you could send me one assignment. That's great. Send me one thing. I'll look at it, mark it, get it back to you. So for this course, if you finish that first assignment, or if you just finish your rough draft and you want some guidance, then I can do that for you. I strongly recommend doing that. Just getting out something, get it to me, and I'll let you know what you're doing right, and I'll give you some feedback for how to make your work even stronger. So these are the ways you can get your work to us. Talk to your DEC. We can scan it, email it. You can fax it. Again, that is a toll-free line. That's a no-charge fax line. And you can always take photos with your phone, email it. Yesterday's class, I mentioned the Adobe Scan app. So that's a really nice app. It's free. There's a premium version you can pay for. You don't have to pay for the premium version. This app is nice because it allows you to scan any document, and the app cleans it up. It brightens it. If you take it kind of crooked, it'll straighten it out. So love that app. I recommend you try that if you have a phone and you have internet access, and you can just simply take photos and send them to me. You do need to reach out to me and your other WASA teachers. I like email. I'm very active with my email, so I like these two email addresses. I'll check them both. You can send your work there or any questions you might have. You can find me on Facebook, and you can always phone the WASA office in Sulicote and get me. And if you want to go that route, this is what you want to do. You want to phone me during my office hours from 9 till 3, Monday through Friday. Of course, 10 a.m. I am teaching. But otherwise, I'm at my desk, and I am ready for your phone call. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to contact me through email, Facebook Messenger, phone, or text. If you haven't done that already, it's really important. And I want you to make a plan for completing assignment 1. We talked about it yesterday's class, and I'm going to come back to it today. And with that in mind, we will jump into class number 2. So this is class 2. We are still on Unit 1, Lesson 1. And today we're going to talk about Assignment 2. We're also going to jump back and talk about Assignment 1. But today we'll cover assignment 2 and we'll finish off assignment 1. So we will talk about the words of the day. We will review our 9 parts of speech. I want all of you to be experts in the 9 parts of speech. We will talk about today's headline. We'll look at some commonly misused words. So there is a list of commonly misspelled words and commonly misused words in your course material in Unit 1. So it's important to understand how to spell words, but sometimes we spell them correctly, we just misuse them. And a lot of times it's a word you've heard before, right? So, you know, the human, when we learn a language, we primarily learn it by listening to other people. That's how we learn a language. We don't really learn it by reading. We learn it by being around adults and older people who talk it, and we listen to it. That's how the human brain is wired. We're wired to listen and to just absorb stuff. Speaking and listening are really natural human things to do. Reading and writing are, to a certain extent, kind of unnatural. Our brains aren't really wired to do it. We have to kind of force our brains to do it. So I think a lot of us, you know, I mentioned this last class, you know a lot of this stuff, you just need to put the right word to it. Then we're going to talk about the writing process, because so much of OLC4O is writing. A lot of it is reading, and you can't be a strong writer if you're not a competent reader, if you don't read a lot. But a lot of focus on this course is writing. You know, it's not just you being able to read things, it's you being able to write and respond to things, and that's what I think it means to be a truly literate person, is someone who can not only read what's out there and be critical of it, but someone who can write too and respond to things, right? So, you know, learning how to read and write, it's not just about reading stories and novels and things you find in a textbook. Learning how to read and write is useful. This is when your landlord gives you a contract, or when you get a job and you sign an employment contract, or if you start a program one day and you want to write a grant and get some money, or, you know, anything, right? So learning how to write gives you power, and learning how to read gives you power as well, right? So we're going to talk about that process, and then we're going to look at Lesson 1, Assignment 2. So I like to start the course, every class off with the words of the day. And I mentioned yesterday that we're starting off with the 7 grandfather teachings, because these teachings are found throughout your course material, and we'll keep coming back to them as the course progresses. Yesterday, we looked at wisdom, and today we'll go on to the next one. This is love, okay? So we have love in the English language, but of course in the indigenous language, Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, we have Zagediwin, which is to know love, which is love, but the 7 grandfather teaching is to know love is to know peace. And again, I am sharing this wisdom, this knowledge from this great organization, the 7 Generations Education Institute. I strongly, they're a partner of ours in education, and I have graciously borrowed this material that they've put up on their website. So I found the 2 different spellings of that indigenous word. So again, I don't speak Anishinaabe, I wish I did. I'm trying to learn more about it, and I love making connections between English and that language and seeing how they're different. So love in this concept is unconditional. It's between one another, includes all creation, humans and non-humans. Now, I mentioned this yesterday too. I love how they break down how the word Zagediwin is actually 3 different ideas combined into one word. And from what I've noticed from my initial research is that Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, it's a very organic language, and some of the words are very long, but if you look at the words, they're all little components that are sort of like sewn together. It's kind of beautiful. And they tell a story. So in this word, we've got three concepts. So we have to emerge, zog, to emerge, come out of, flow out. We have ed, which is in a reciprocal way, which means, reciprocal means both ways, which means you love the world loves you back. You love your family, they love you back. And then win, a way it is done. So it's a way of loving the universe and having the universe love you back. It's a really beautiful concept. So if you're thinking about assignment 1, trying to think about which grandfather teaching you want to talk about, you could talk about this one. And love. What does it mean for you to love the world, to be loved back? How has that happened in your life? And then looking at the English, we have love, which can be a noun or it can be a verb. So a really important concept for us to remember in this chorus, that we're learning the parts of speech, we're breaking down the language into its smallest parts, and then we're going to master those small parts, and we're going to combine those small parts into phrases and sentences, and then we're going to combine those sentences into paragraphs, and we're going to build paragraphs into essays and assignments. And so it's little pieces that build up to bigger pieces. So love can be a noun or it can be a verb. So it's an intense feeling of deep affection. So in this case, the coach could not doubt her love of the game. So in this sense, I've color-coded it blue because it's a noun. We've got I'm thinking about my niece here. We've got a young woman who loves the game of hockey. So her love of the game is a thing that we can talk about. It's a thing, it's an idea. But love is also a doing word. That's actually a line from a song. Love is a verb, love is a doing thing, right? So to love is to feel a deep affection for someone or something. So we can love people, we can love dogs, but we can love things too. We can love the world. So Sophie didn't like going to school, but she loved being on the hockey team. So loved is a thing. In this case, it's not a thing. It's an action. It's an action, or it's something you feel deep inside, right? That it's a verb that way. So it can be two things, right? So really quickly, nouns, they name a person, place, or thing. Verbs are actions or doing words. Get that out of there. Pronouns stand in place of a noun. I, he, she, it. Conjunctions are the joining words, very important words. They join words or groups of words. We're going to get more into this later when we talk about how to build a sentence. But when you build a sentence, it's almost like using Lego blocks. I love that example. It's like there's connector pieces that combine parts of a sentence together. And conjunctions, and a conjunction is literally like in the real world, when you conjoin things, you're taking two pieces, and the conjunction is what keeps them together. So words like and, but, yet, however. Prepositions, these show relationships between things. They are usually spatial, in the sense that they tell us where something is in space. From, beside, underneath, over there. They also tell us things about like time, like while, during. So they tell us where something is, they tell us how long it's been there, things like that. Interjections are words or phrases that show strong emotion. Wow, hey. Adverbs tell us how an action is done. Adjectives tell us what a noun is like. So adjectives are great words. They're great words that help make our writing come alive, okay? You don't want to go overboard and describe everything, but you do need to be descriptive in your writing, especially during the first two assignments in this course. The first assignment, you're talking about the grandfather teachings and what they mean in your life. The second assignment is talking about growing up in your community. And when we tell stories to our friends and our family, it's really important when you have really descriptive details. You want the listener to care about your story and put them in your story. And the way to do that is to use adjectives and adverbs too. And articles, there's 3 of them, a, an, and the. And there are, and then there's also like the definitive article. Like there are, there is a hockey team, and a hockey team could be any hockey team, and then there is the hockey team, which is, we're talking about a specific team. So articles, they're just useful words that tell us about a noun or a thing. And it's really hard to describe what an article is, but all you have to know is there's 3 of them, a, an, and the. And then, so we have our 9 parts of speech. Sometimes you see 8, sometimes you see 9. I like to go with 9 because there are 9 in the English language. I mentioned this yesterday. Not all languages across the world have all 9. Some of them only have a few, but language is constructed of these parts. This is the way humans have decided to communicate with each other. And you can really see why we do these things, right? Imagine a language without nouns. That I'm not sure if that exists in the world. I don't think it does. People need words to describe the things in their world. I love this kind of stuff. And one of the main theories they have is that humans invented language so they could teach other people how to do things. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about humans a very long time ago learning how to manufacture axes and hammers and spears and things like that out of stone. And one of the things they realized was that you can't really learn how to do it just by watching somebody do it. You have to have someone explain to you how to do it. And that's sort of how they figure out when humans invented language. They have people in labs in universities, and they try to make these stone tools. And you think, well, it's just a stone tool. That's easy. But it takes hours and hours of someone showing you how to do it and explaining to you how to do it. So we need to name the things in our world, and we need to name how to do them, right? So just for time's sake, I will come back to this. I do want to try to compose a sentence on the fly with us and try to challenge ourselves and to make one right there. But in the purpose of moving on with this course, we're gonna keep going. So I like to put a headline in every class. This is one from last week's headline. So I was thinking about Remembrance Day and thinking about soldiers and wars of days past. But of course, we have a war going on today in the Ukraine. And so this headline reads, Canadian veteran from Saskatchewan killed fighting in eastern Ukraine. So that's our headline. And I want to break that headline down and look at the parts of speech. So there it is. That's our headline. I've color-coded every word in that headline and talked about what parts of speech each word is. Every word in a sentence or a headline will correspond to a parts of speech. It depends on how it's used, right? A word like Saskatchewan is a noun. I can't see Saskatchewan being, it might be an adjective if we're talking about where somebody's from. Certain words can only be used a couple of ways, but some words are very versatile. So in this case, a veteran is a thing. So a veteran is a noun, but it's a very special kind of veteran. It's a Canadian veteran. So the word Canadian modifies this word right here, right? So Canadian is an adjective. It tells me what kind of veteran it is. This Canadian veteran was from Saskatchewan. So a preposition is a relationship word. It tells me where something is, where it's from. They are from Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is a proper noun. We always capitalize proper nouns. Capital S, Saskatchewan. What happened to this soldier, unfortunately? They were killed. That's a verb. They were killed doing what? They were killed fighting. So the word fighting can be a noun, an adjective. It can be a verb. In this case, it's a verb. So they were doing two things. So two things happened to this person. They were fighting and they were killed. And where were they killed? They were killed in, that's a preposition, Eastern Ukraine. So Ukraine is a proper noun. It's a part of the world. And Eastern modifies it, okay? And so that's a little breakdown of how the parts of speech work in a very real everyday setting. So the word fighting can be a noun, it can be an adjective, or it can be a verb. Here's 3 examples. A Canadian soldier was killed during the fighting in Ukraine. So in this case, we didn't say they were killed fighting in the Ukraine. We're talking about the fighting. So in that case, the fighting is a thing that we can talk about. It's the war. We could have said the war in Ukraine. And war is a noun. It's a thing. It's an idea. So we're talking about the idea of the fighting, not someone actually fighting. So in that case, it's a noun. Second example, the boxer needs to develop their fighting skills before their next match. So this boxer has skills. What kind of skills do they have? Of course, they're a boxer. They have fighting skills. So the word fighting is an adjective that modifies skills. It tells me what kind of skills you have. The third example, I am fighting a bad flu today. I'm not, thankfully, but in this case, someone could be. So in this case, fighting is a verb. It's something you're doing right now. So it gets complicated, but when you think about it, it makes sense, right? So this word fighting can be 3 different parts of speech, and it all depends on how you, the writer, include it in your sentence. So you have to be aware of that, right? So the order it's in, the way it's structured, changes the meaning of the word. So words are versatile. They're very useful, but you have to know how to use them. They're tools. You have to be smart in how you use them. So again, a verb is a doing word. It expresses action, a state, or a relationship between 2 things. Verbs have tenses. We have to be careful with our tenses. They tell us when the action took place. Oh, I made a mistake. Look place. When the action took place, or when it will take place. So there's actually about, I think there's like 12 or 14 tenses in the English language, but they all fall under 3 categories. We're either talking about the past, things that did happen, we're talking about the present, things that are happening right now, or we're talking about the future, things that are going to happen. And then there's tenses like things that you want to happen in the future, things that might happen in the future, things that could have happened in the past but didn't, right? So, but that's just breaking it down into further categories. But really, there's 3 big categories you got to be aware of. And most examples, right, like if it's in the past, it usually ends in the ED or a D. Not always, but usually. Present tense verbs, the gerund form of the verb is usually ing. And then if we're talking about the future, we usually have to add a word like will or will be, something like that. So this is what we call verb conjugation, right? So this is how we change a verb, right? So but you have to be careful on how you use the verb depending on the tense of your sentence. And when you're writing a sentence, it's really important to stay in the same tense. You don't want to start off in the past tense and then shift into the present or future. You want to have your sentence stay in the same tense for the most part, right? Gets confusing for the reader if you start switching around. Okay, we're going to touch on some commonly misused words. So I find the best way to do this is to use them in one sentence. So there is no way that they're going to forget how to use their knowledge. So the word there is spelled 3 different ways. The best way, I think, to keep this in mind is if you see the apostrophe shows me a letter is missing. And it's pretty easy to figure out which letter is missing. So they apostrophe RE is the same thing as saying they are. And THEIR is a pronoun that stands in place for somebody else, right? So it's when we're talking about their, we're talking about people. And then that leaves the other one, which is just talking about, a relationship between things. Another one is ITS, right? So IT apostrophe S is equivalent to it is. It is not looking good for my car. Its battery died this morning. So its is a pronoun that refers back to car. We use pronouns because we try to avoid the repetition. So we could say, it's not looking good for my car. My car's battery died this morning. We say it's because it's faster than saying my car. And if I was talking to you on the street or if I was talking to you at Tim Hortons, you would know that it's is standing in place for car. And you might not know what a pronoun is, and you may have never even heard the word pronoun, but you can use pronouns and you can understand them. And that's how a pronoun works, right? But ITS, it talks about what belongs to its. So in this case, it's the battery that belongs to it, and it refers to my car. So it all kind of cycles back on each other, right? So IT apostrophe S is it is, and ITS is telling me that something belongs to it. You're not getting your money today. I think this is probably the number one. I see this all the time. That's probably the number one misused word in the English language. But again, if we see an apostrophe, we know we can break it down, or sorry, opposite, we can expand it. So your is the same thing as you are. You are not getting your money today. And your is a possessive noun, right? So it means that something belongs to you, whoever you is, right? The principal of my school said his principal aim is to make sure I graduate this year. So I can't remember what TV show it was, but I remember a TV principal once saying, might have been Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell, but he said, the principal is not your pal. So, and I've always used that, right? So the principal, like the principal of a high school, is not your pal. So if you see the pal at the end, that's not the head of the school. The person who runs the school is the principal, PLE. A principal just means like number one or most important, right? So this principal, his number one aim is to make sure I graduate high school, right? So the principal is not your pal. So just little ways to remember that. And so the apostrophe is a symbol. It's a piece of punctuation that we use. And I'm not sure what the most misused piece of punctuation is. Commas have got to be up there, but apostrophes have got to be the most misused. We see apostrophes all the time, but we don't really know how to use them some of the time. But there are 3 ways we use an apostrophe. Number 1 is we use it to show possession. So my sister's dog. It's the dog that belongs to my sister. On the other side of that, we have my twin sister's birthday. So it's the birthday that belongs to my sisters, 2 of them, right? If a word ends in an S, we just put the apostrophe on the end. We don't go like that. We just put an apostrophe on the, and then I know that it's something that belongs to sisters, 2 or more sisters. In this case, twin sisters. We also use apostrophes to show missing letters, what I just talked about. So it is Same thing as IT apostrophe S. They are is the same thing as they apostrophe RE, and I am is the same thing as I'm. Or we could say I did. Is the same thing as I'd. It gets a bit confusing because I did or I would can mean the same thing, but that's how that works. And then the third, much less common example, but we show plurals of single letters. So so if we're talking about B's on a report card, or I counted 7 C's in the poem, we put an apostrophe there. We usually don't do it for numbers. I'm not sure why. English is kind of confusing, but I did some research on this, and usually you would say like 7s, like that. Like I was playing a game of poker, and on the flop I got 2 7s. You would just go 7, 7S, right, to show plurals, right? But if we're talking about letters, yeah, you typically put the apostrophe there. All right, so we're talking about actually before we do that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull up my lesson from yesterday because I didn't have a chance to finish it. All right. I'm going to go back to assignment 1 from yesterday. We were talking about assignment 1, the 7 grandfather teachings. And I was walking everybody through the writing process. Let's just click all the way up there. All right, so the writing process comes down to 5 steps. And as you see here, I've blocked off those 5 steps. Sorry, I blocked off the first 4, right? Planning 1, writing 2, revising 3, editing 4. Because these first 4 steps, they happen, but it's not like you plan and you're done planning, and then you write and you're done writing, and then you revise. I find that, well, usually for me, like my planning process is first, and that part is usually done, and then I do some writing. Once I've got some writing, I try to revise what I've written. And when I revise, remember, revision is like big picture stuff. It's like moving paragraphs around and finding a general theme for our writing. It's really big ideas, right? Like it's manipulating paragraphs and the overall structure of our assignment. Editing is like word choice and editing on a sentence by sentence level. So I might revise what I wrote, and that's why it's kind of like, sorry, it's getting confusing, but it's a circular process, right? So you write, you revise, you write some more, you revise, and then you edit a long time, and you edit what you've got, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I need to write at least one more paragraph. I need to go back to writing, and then once I've written, I revise it, and then once I've revised it, I edit it, and then I finally got my edits where I want them to be, then I publish. And when we publish, we either hit save on a Word document, we put the pen down and say it's done, and we send it off to a teacher. The publishing phase is when you're done with it, and in your mind, it's finished. You might come back to it later, but for the time being, it's done. So we talked about picking 1 to 3 of the grandfather teachings, and then writing down as many words or ideas as we could about those things, and then picking our favorite ones, and then seeing if we could make some connections between them. So here's what I did. I'm going to work on becoming a better writer in terms of like strictly penmanship, so you can read my writing a little more. But hopefully you can read my chicken scratch, as my grade 4 teacher called it. I just went with wisdom and love because those were the first 2 we talked about. You might do the same. You might pick different grandfather teachings, but I picked wisdom and I picked love. Under wisdom, I wrote down my experience in school. And I wasn't really specific to what school meant. So is that, I'm putting high school, question mark. Am I talking about my university days? I don't know. What am I going to talk about? And so, this is the planning phase. So you're really having a conversation with yourself. And that's basically what you're doing. You're putting down ideas, and that's why I put a question mark. Am I talking about high school? Am I talking about school? What am I talking about? I could do both. I could do neither. This is just, sometimes they call it spitballing, right? You're just putting ideas on the page. You could use all of this. You could use none of this. It's up to you. But it really helps to plan things out. I talked about my favorite writers, my heroes, my mentors, and then on this side we talked about love, family, friends, wife. Talk about my dog, Snowy. My love of hockey, right? That's a lot of stuff right there, right? I think I'm not all over the place, but I don't think I could talk about all of this stuff, but I've got an idea, right? At least I've got something I can work with. And so this is part one of this, right? So writing down as many words as I can. And then the idea web is where I'm picking my favorite ones. And this is just one. So under the general category of wisdom, I've written down my mentors, right? And I talked yesterday about my lessons. I'm going to say, what I can teach. Writing, favorite movies. I wrote down my grandma. Maybe I'll just elaborate, what she taught me. My parents and my favorite writers. But when I come back to this 24 hours later, what I focus on is this random people. And I had a great experience when I was in university. And I was at a bus stop in Winnipeg. And in my mind, I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be a structural or a mechanical engineer. And I was going to school and I was taking a lot of science courses. And I was doing really badly in them. I got Fs. I got Ds. I wasted a lot of money, and I was really struggling with that and feeling down on myself and feeling like I was wasting my life and I was spending all this money and, what was I doing with my life? And I met a random guy at a bus stop, and we got to talking well, what are you taking in school? What are you doing, right? And then he looked at me and he said, look at you, buddy. You're not a science guy. You're an artsy guy. You should be taking English and you should be studying art or something. And it was just okay, random guy at the bus station. But the next semester I signed up for a short story course and I took it in the evening and I just absolutely loved it. And it took me for a while to admit that I said, well, maybe I could be a science guy. Maybe I could be someone who does math, but it's clearly not working out now, but I love talking about stories and I love talking about English and language. Maybe I should do that. And the random guy at the bus stop was right. And I became an English major. So if I was to do assignment 1, and if I was to talk about the 7 grandfather teachings and what they've meant in my life, I might include that story. And you can do that. You can talk about a story from your life. And I think that's going to be a really easy way to do that assignment. Step 2, you do a free write. So I talked about this yesterday. I love free writing. I can't recommend free writing enough. I think free writing is the #1 technique that all beginning writers should embrace. You need to activate the part of your brain that just writes things out. Now, Ernest Hemingway, very famous writer, he is famous for saying you should write drunk and edit sober. And he didn't literally mean, write when you're drunk. What he meant is that you need to use the part of your brain that's wild and just puts down ideas and just goes crazy and just throws everything they can at the page. Because there is a part of your brain that does that. There's a part of our brain that just goes. It just talks and it just generates ideas and doesn't care where they're going. There is a part of you that can do that. And there's another part of you that's more careful and likes to correct things and likes things to be just the way they are. So I think you have to embrace that as a writer. And free writing, there's not much to it. It's a very powerful tool. It's very simple. All you do is, when you free write, you have to have some kind of a general plan. And so in this case, our general plan is we have our list of words in front of us. We have our list of our words and ideas. And then we set a timer. I want you to go for 5 minutes, but I also want you to build up. Try to build up to like 10 or 15 minutes. And you're going to be really surprised at how much you can do. If you train yourself and you can write for 15 minutes and not stop, you can get hundreds of words on the page. If you're a fast typer, I guarantee you'll hit 1,000. 1,000 words in 15 minutes. It's not going to be the greatest 1,000 words you ever written, but you're going to take that raw material and make it shine, okay? I'm a musician. I like to use examples from being a musician, right? If you just forced yourself to just play random riffs on a guitar for 15 minutes and recorded it, and you came back and you listened to it, guaranteed there's going to be at least 10 seconds in there that you could use. But if you just sat there and did nothing, you would have nothing to work with. So you set your timer and you write as much as you can, and you don't stop. That's the really important thing. You do not stop. The most important part is not stopping. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be spelled correctly. This is all part of the process. We're trying to conquer writer's block, and that's how we do it. The way to conquer writer's block is just to simply write and not let yourself stop. And then we revise, and we come back and we make changes to what we've written. And then we try to see some themes that are emerging. It's also when we take a lot of rough ideas and we start to organize them in a way that makes sense, okay? So revising is when you take your list of ideas and then you review what you wrote from your free write. So you take that list of ideas, look at what you wrote, and then you try to find the main idea or theme. So if I was going to do this, I would do a free write, and then maybe I'll do that today at my desk. I'll do a 15-minute free write, and then I'll show you what I got tomorrow. I would take that little nugget of wisdom, that mentorship, and random people that I've met in my life, and maybe about my grandma and my favorite writers, but I would try to write about people in my life who I've met who have given me wisdom and how I use that wisdom to do things in my life. So and then I think that'd be my main idea or theme, right? So, and this is a really important concept, right? A main idea or a theme. Really strong writing is writing that's focused and has a message to it, right? So that's why you don't want to talk about all 7 grandfather teachings in one paragraph. It's just too much to cover. I really strongly suggest you take 1 grandfather teaching or 2 grandfather teachings and try to build off of those things, right? And what do those 2 things mean to you, right? Don't forget about respect. Don't forget about humility and bravery and all that, but find 1 or 2 and build a paragraph around it. And then you reorganize what you've written. And then once you've done that, guess what? You've got yourself a rough copy. And then you go into the editing process. And the editing process, again, is when we fine-tune things. The editing process is when we look at word choice and we look at punctuation and we look at sentence by sentence writing. Editors call this punching up. I love that phrase, right? They say, hey, here's a rough draft, here's an idea. I need you to punch this up. I need you to make it better. This is what writers in all fields do, whether they write for late night comedy, whether they are academic writers, whether they're archaeologists, whether they're researchers or newspaper writers or bloggers or people who go on Twitter, whatever the case, right? You put down your idea and then you punch it up and you make it better. That's what that, and learning how to be a writer is learning how to be an editor, right? You can't just expect somebody else to edit your work. You have to edit your work. And you have to edit other people's work, right? So that's what really makes you a powerful writer, is when you can look at something and you can make it better. So that's when you do. That's when you're adding words, you're cutting words, you're making changes to our sentences. You know, and I think it's really important, too, to keep this in mind. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to generate new ideas and to edit them at the same time. And I think that's what leads to writer's block. That's what leads to people struggling and just looking at a blank page and being like, I can't do this. I don't know what to write. And I think people expect the words just to flow off the page perfectly. But if you read interviews with famous writers like Stephen King and Margaret Atwood, you name it, no one produces perfect material right off of their pen. Nobody does that. They all go back and edit it. But that's the hard part, right? Is all you see is the finished product. It's like an athlete or a musician. You see them on stage, you see them on the ice. They look amazing. They look incredible. You don't see the hard work. You don't see the 1,000 times they fell down. You don't see the 1,000 times they screwed up and played the wrong note. All you see is that perfect kind of like execution. So it's deceptive, but all writers have to do this. You have to make mistakes, and you go back and you fix them. And the best approach is to do them separately. So you got to keep those two parts separate, right? The writing, and by writing I mean just generating new ideas. So writing is on one side, and then editing and revising is on the other side. And as you get better as a writer, you will be able to revise and edit as you write. But you're still going to have to rely upon the part of your brain that just dumps ideas on the page. And when we edit, you're going to go back, and I strongly recommend you do this too, right? So you're going to catch a lot of mistakes. I remember doing this for the first time, and I felt so stupid, reading my own work out loud to myself. And when I say out loud, I mean out loud. You might get embarrassed, but, shut yourself in a room. If you don't want people to hear you, just, do that. If you're really brave, you can record yourself on a phone and read yourself reading your paragraph into a phone. Go back and listen to it. Trust me, you're gonna find a lot of mistakes, and maybe more importantly, you're gonna find ways to make them better. I used to, about 10 years ago, I was writing a lot of short stories, and I would take drives to Dryden on the weekends, and I would talk about a story, and I would record it onto my phone, and then at night, when I'd be editing that story, I would listen to what I would talk about, and it was kind of cool just to have this conversation with myself. But the important thing is you read your rough copy out loud, and I guarantee you will find mistakes and things you want to change. Number 2, if you can. Not everybody has someone in their life they trust enough to do this, but if you're lucky, I've got my wife. She's a great writer. She reads all my stuff. Ask someone to read your paragraph. Ask them to look for any errors. Get them to give you a marked up copy. Look up words in a dictionary to make sure you haven't misspelled any words. Read that thing if you've got any hesitation on one of the words, look it up in a dictionary. Make sure you're using it correctly. Even better, go to thesaurus.com. Look up a word. Maybe there's a better word that's similar to that word. Maybe there's a synonym you might want to use, right? Number 4, and I love this one, okay? Whoops, let's get rid of that. Number 4, go for a walk. Think about your paragraph. Or do the dishes, or, take your dog for a walk, play with your kids, or some kind of an activity. For me, go stack some firewood, a chore or something you can do with your hands while you're thinking. And think about your paragraph. Then go back and read what you wrote and make a few more changes. So it's really important to just write something, get it on the page, and then come back to it and think about it, right? So our brains, they're not computers, but in some ways they're very similar to a computer in that our brains love to solve problems. And our brains solve problems when we're not even thinking about it, right? So if you think about your writing and you go for a walk, or if it's the last thing you do at night and you wake up in the morning and you come back to it, guaranteed, like, some part of your brain is working on that problem and is going to have new ideas, right? So if you're frustrated with your writing and you feel you can't do anymore, or you're just feeling down, that's a good time to stop, put the pen down, close the laptop, go for a walk, think about it, come back to it. When you're a little more awake, a little more positive, I guarantee it, you're gonna have some ideas that you can bring to the page. Okay, so that's a step-by-step process that you can go through. Obviously, we ran out of time, but it's really important to cover that process. When we come back tomorrow, we'll do the same steps for assignment number 2, but I think I've given you enough tools to talk about assignment 1. And then, of course, once you're ready, you send that over to me, right? And when you publish it, you're sending me a rough copy, so keep that in mind. You're doing a rough copy and a final copy. You're sending me both, okay? You want to send me a rough copy and a final copy. So when we come back tomorrow, we'll talk about that writing process. And the steps, they don't change very much, but depending on the writing project, they will change a little bit. And the planning process is going to be different. If I'm talking about my community and growing up in my community, I'm going to have a little bit different process, right? So thanks for tuning in today, and we will join back tomorrow. And